Rage on that beat, going crazy.
Welcome, Hamptonians, to the next edition of our C-Suite panel. Tonight's panel is all around careers within the healthcare industry, and we're really excited to talk to these illustrious alum coming up next. A couple of things I want to announce as we get started. Below within the chat is a box for you to insert any questions or comments. For now, shout out your class, shout out who you are representing, and make sure you're utilizing that to put any questions into the box. Also, make sure you take an opportunity to like NHAA Inc. here on YouTube and follow our page so you can continuously get any updates as we launch any events through our YouTube channel. And right now, as you know, we've had multiple C-suite panels. I'm going to pass this on to our moderator, Michelle Okeke, and get us started. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gina. I truly appreciate it. Thank you to the NHAA for giving us this platform to speak to you all. Shout out to all the Hampton alum that are tapping in today. You are the real ones for making time today. Thank you for joining us. We have an array of great, phenomenal, illustrious alumni who are within the healthcare space. We're going to talk about their journey, talk about how Hampton was able to get them there, and their untraditional routes of how they got into healthcare. For those who don't know me, my name is Mitchell Okeke. I am a fourth-year pharmacy student now, almost done, and I will be a soon alumni next year in class of 2022. And currently, I am going to be a pharmacist in a non-traditional route. I am going to head off into the pharmaceutical industry. A lot of people don't know too much about the pharmaceutical industry, and currently right now, I am a digital marketing intern with a pharmaceutical company called Indivior. And yes, pharmacists can be marketers too, and we have a couple marketers here on the call with us. But without further ado, I'm going to just give some brief introductions of our four panelists who are going to talk a little bit about their experiences and how they transitioned into healthcare and how Hampton has allowed them to be as successful as they are. First and foremost, my mom would kill me if I didn't introduce her first, because I am a gentleman. We have Admiral Aisha Mix, who I'm going to pass along to just give a brief introduction of herself.
Excellent. Hello, fellow Hamptonians. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here tonight. So as was mentioned, I am Admiral Aisha Mix, class of 1995, out of course, the School of Nursing. I serve as the Chief Nurse in the United States Public Health Service. So I've got leadership over nearly 1,400 nurses on our active duty roster, and also serve as the senior advisor on matters related to nursing for the Surgeon General. And lastly, on the world stage, I also represent the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to the World Health Assembly, where I form a part of the government chief nurse officers, so nurses that lead in other countries, and we form the strategic direction for nursing leadership and practice and education.
Perfect. Thank you. Next up, we have Mr. Brian Hawkins.
Thank you, Mitchell. Brian Hawkins, pleasure to be here with everyone. I am the Global Marketing Director at Merck & Company Pharmaceuticals. I'm personally responsible for our diabetes franchise. Again, I have global responsibility, so I'm responsible for creating and executing the strategy for all markets outside of the US and then collaborating with our US market as well. I'm from the graduating class of 2000, and it's a pleasure to be here to speak with you all today.
Perfect. Next, we have Mr. John McAdory.
Yes, hi, and thank you guys for attending. I'm John McAdory from the class of 1999. I was a biology major while I was in Hampton. Currently, I'm the Vice President of Clinical Operations for CG Oncology. I've been in the oncology field for the past 15 years, helping develop novel therapies, hoping to find treatments and cures for different types of cancers. Currently, we're running our trials in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and of course here in the US. So I'm excited to join the panel today and look forward to a lively discussion.
last but certainly not least, we have Mr. Brian Taylor.
Mitchell, thank you for that introduction, and well, I'm honored to be here tonight with these other illustrious Hamptonians. Currently, I am the Region Business Director for Global Blood Therapeutics. We are a small biotech pharmaceutical organization focused in sickle cell disease. I am responsible for approximately about $100 million worth of business going from DC to New Jersey. And so I think my core role is ensuring I'm on the sales side and ensuring that hematologists, oncologists are made aware of a new therapy for sickle cell disease.
Great, perfect. Thank you to our panelists for those great and brief introductions. I'm going to first start off with this question. At which point in your life did you see yourself transitioning into your current role into this industry? Was it pre or post graduation that you see yourself? And we'll start with Rear Admiral Aisha Mix.
Hampton played a really big part in me actually becoming a nurse. When I went on my tour of Hampton, I was still deciding between nursing and medicine. And it was the dean of the School of Nursing that said, well, hey, do you know the difference between nursing and medicine? Medicine stands to take care of the disease process, whereas nurses stands to take care of the person. And at that point, I knew that nursing was the way that I wanted to tackle healthcare challenges. Fast forward to where I am now. At absolutely no point in my career did I ever write it down and say, I want to be chief nurse of the U.S. Public Health Service. Not at all. I think so many opportunities fell into my lap. One of the things that we say in the School of Nursing, what do you call a nursing grad a year after graduation? Charge nurse. And when we graduate, we have that leadership sense instilled. And so I knew I was going somewhere, but it took a minute to really figure out where I wanted to be. But nursing certainly was from day one.
Wow, amazing. And we're going to go to Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, Mitchell. So my story is a little non-traditional. I actually did not seek to get into healthcare. My passion was actually marketing. And so there were 3 events that sort of led me down that path. The first was I took a marketing course in high school where you talked about using data to identify the customer, using that data to then identify the right message for the customer, sort of meeting them where they are. And I really enjoyed it. So that helped me sort of choose my major. The second event were Whedon and Kennedy advertisements for Air Jordan gym shoes. So as a kid, obviously, I was in love with Michael Jordan basketball shoes, right? But it was the commercials that they did with Spike Lee that really intrigued me, the artistry, the creativity that was behind those commercials. I said to myself, that's something that I think I want to do full time. The third event was the movie Boomerang. The lead character, hopefully everybody that's watching this knows, Marcus. He was an advertising and marketing executive. And I said to myself, that sounds like a good idea. If I can do a job that will allow me to create cool commercials like the Spike Lee Air Jordan commercials, I get to wear cool suits like Marcus from Boomerang, then this is something that I can actually do for a living, right? So it was those 3 things. What led me down the healthcare path, however, was when I interned with Merck. I had interviewed with a number of companies, and the atmosphere at Merck and the people that I've met along the way really did intrigue me. And I was going to be challenged during that internship to stretch myself beyond what I even thought was capable of my capabilities at that time. So it was the atmosphere at Merck. And then I decided, once I got a sense of the passion for what we do at Merck, I decided to stick around and stay. So sort of a non-traditional approach, but I'm glad that I ended up here, and I obviously stayed for over 20 years. So hopefully I can finish out my career in this space as well.
Amazing story. I do love Spike Lee. I cannot wait for the new Space Jam movie to come out with LeBron James and see how close they got to Mike. But next up, John, just hear your story about it.
Sure, thank you, Mitchell. And so kind of like Aisha, I've always wanted to go into healthcare. My father's a physician. My mother's been a healthcare administrator. And so for me, healthcare has been part of our family. I have other physicians, aunts and uncles, cousins. So that's always kind of the path I wanted to go down. So when I got to Hampton, I made it in biology pre-med, and the intent was to go to medical school. But shortly after I graduated, I got introduced to clinical trials while working at my father's practice. And that kind of led me in a different direction from going into the medical field. And I really started to realize I love the business of healthcare, not only on the pharmaceutical side, but as well as the health IT capabilities and trying to work to bring more access to healthcare from a business perspective. So I got involved in clinical trials and clinical research and been doing that for the past 22 years since graduation. I'm especially proud because I've been working a lot on different oncology drugs and bringing those to market. So I've always wanted to be in this field. I thought I would be more in the medical side, but due to the inspiration of my parents and seeing the duality of both the medical and the business side, I realized that the business side of healthcare is where I wanted to be. So I got my master's in health administration from Carolina. And so I'm excited to continue my career. And I've been promoted over the years, and now I'm at the executive level of being a VP.
Thank you. You know, all this talk of drugs has got me going. So I love to hear it.
Sure.
And last, but not Mr. Taylor.
I'm similar to Brian. I was a non-traditional route into pharmaceuticals. I actually graduated from Hampton and went to graduate school, University of Massachusetts, and got my master's in sports marketing. I was in sports marketing for a year, and then I actually interviewed for a role to be the sports director for the marketing team at Wendy's. I didn't get the role. However, the feedback was you need more structured sales experience. And in the process of looking for a job, a friend of mine said, "Hey, have you thought about pharmaceutical sales?" And I hadn't. And he recommended me, and I went on an interview. And believe me, I couldn't pronounce nephropathy, hypertrophy. I had no idea the difference between systolic and diastolic pressure. But then when I got into it, it was almost like a calling for me because I actually had success and I stayed in. And how my career progressed was that I had a mentor of mine pull me aside one day and said, "Hey, what do you want to do with your career when you grow up in this industry?" And me being bold and probably a little bit aggressive at the time said, "I want your job." And he was the senior VP of sales at Bristol Myers Squibb. And he said, "Hold on, young fella, let's figure out where you want to go and what you need to do." And from there, I realized I needed to diversify my background and really get more cross-functional and do different roles within the organization to understand a full 360-degree view of the business, not just selling, but marketing, market access and managed care, and everything that goes into driving the growth of a brand from launch to, and obviously managing the life cycle. And so my route into healthcare was very much non-traditional, where I like to tell people that it found me more so than I found it. But once I got in, it was a true calling where I found success. And here I am today now with the start of biotech, focusing, covering the Northeast region.
Great, amazing experiences. As you all hear, healthcare does not discriminate. You do not have to have a science degree to get in within the healthcare systems. There is so many different avenues that you can take. You can be in business, you can be in nursing, you can be in pharmacy. All these great areas are well needed and all play a huge role in a collaborative effort to bring efficient healthcare to our population. And talking specifically with healthcare, as we know, COVID-19 has changed the landscape of healthcare. A lot of people are not able to, get to see their physicians as quickly as it used to be. A lot of, restrictions have, subdued our abilities to, manage our healthcare. So how has your healthcare industry changed within this past year, and what are some adjustments that, are here to stay? And we'll start with Admiral Mix.
Sure. Interestingly, 2020 was the International Year of the Nurse and the Midwife. It was set that way. It was the 200th birthday or anniversary of the birth of Florence Nightingale, and it was already set to be a global celebration of the contribution of nurses and the role of nurses in the healthcare system. On January 1st, 2020, we went out the gates and we were excited. Little did we know how much nursing was going to be pushed to the forefront. So when you talk about what has changed over the past year, honestly, it's easier to say what has not changed, right? Because everything that we knew healthcare to be has changed. As a public health nurse, and especially as an officer in the public health service, we are familiar with responding to disasters, to public health emergencies and things of this nature. However, when you overlay a pandemic with all of the gaps that we already had existing in our healthcare system, it peeled back so many layers, and so many more people are now aware of what's in the way for folks to be healthy, right? Health is not a matter of, somebody just wakes up one morning and decides to have unhealthy choices. Like, that's not how it happens. There's circumstances, right? Where people live, where they work, where they play, where they pray, where they learn. All of these things come into factors on what impacts health. So some of these things that have come to the forefront, that connection of public health and nursing, and how do we create healthy environments? How do we empower all the health professionals and those that interface with health to do the best of their ability for the right people? I think those are the changes that are to come. But we've got a ways to go still. But I think the heightened awareness is certainly what has changed over this past year.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, Mitchell. So I'm going to attack this from two different fronts. First, I think many of our healthcare providers are having to think differently about the way that they deliver healthcare, right? So you made a point about patients not being able to make it into practices to get their routine evaluations. The trajectory of the implementation of telemedicine has increased significantly since the advent of COVID. The other side to that, though, is the way that companies like mine interact with customers has also had to change. We're looking for more ways to engage our customers through digital means. So your internship in the digital space is not only very timely, but you asked about what changes are going to stick. Well, I can tell you that the digital horizon is certainly something that not only is going to be important now, but also even much more so in the future, right? The way that we're engaging with our customers, the platforms that we're using to engage with customers are evolving. Because the pandemic sort of came out of nowhere for many HCPs, a lot of these customers had no idea how to even leverage the platforms that they had, right? And some of these companies, their capabilities were also limited. So everyone was sort of scrambling in the midst of the pandemic to try to figure it out. Technology, thankfully, has evolved in such a way that we're now able to engage over a telecommunications device like we're doing right now. There are still obviously several tests and evaluations that you can't do outside of being in a personal face-to-face platform. But we're having to really think differently about healthcare and trying to find ways to sort of bridge the gap for those communities that are underserved, so that we can make sure that healthcare across the board is accessible for everyone.
Yes, love the insight. As I like to say, Dr. Google is one of our best friends, and that's usually one of the first places that a lot of us kind of tend to go towards when we have a healthcare related issue, due to probably the lack of ability to get transportation to our healthcare providers, getting in contact with our healthcare providers, and it's just easy to do a quick Google search and go to WebMD or one of these other healthcare related issues. So digital, as you said, Mr. Hawkins, is going to be definitely somehow that we are able to connect with our HCPs and being able to make sure that all the pertinent information is transmitted not only to our HCPs, but also to our patients as well, so they can be able to find the correct information that they need within their healthcare, their journeys. So
Mitchell, before you move on, I do just want to address this. Dr. Google is a gift and a curse. Okay. Yes. There are nuances about our healthcare that cannot be addressed through a search engine, right? There is no replacement for a healthcare provider conducting a thorough evaluation on the patient. So just please keep that in mind.
Yes. I think all of us are nodding because we all agree with that statement right there.
Absolutely.
John?
And like Brian, I'll take it in two fronts. One, for us running clinical trials, and we're a very large piece of the pharmaceutical landscape, high expense, high dollar to get drugs to market. And when the resources within the hospitals and clinics were either work from home status, or I know like several hospitals deployed their clinical research staff that have to help take care of COVID patients, and then in the latter stages of 2020 have to help administer the vaccine. Then all of a sudden there's a decrease in participation in clinical trials, the ability of patients to see visits, and as well as one interesting fact is that they're making determinations on what was considered critical surgeries, and so if a patient came in and needed to have surgery, say for cancer, need to have a biopsy done, and that wasn't considered critical at the moment, these patients were sent home. And so I know right now in Canada, they've seen an incidence and spikes in terms of cancer rates over the last 6 to 12 months, because people haven't been able to come in and have that normal surveillance and normal care that they're used to having. So that disruption in just the managed care and the continuity of care has really impacted on the global landscape, and we're yet to see downstream how much of an impact that will have in terms of the delivery of care and success in terms of treatments for various diseases. But for me, in terms of how I took approach, I actually got involved into a telehealth company where we actually developed a telehealth platform that we're trying to bring to market. So on top of, because as Brian said, telehealth is booming, and one of the biggest things that telehealth can bring is more access to care. There's been a lot of grants from the government and NIH in terms of how to bring telehealth to rural communities, because they realize that is a way to ensure continuity of care, ensure people are getting delivery of healthcare. You can't replace a doctor in-person visit, but at least you can have those touch points where you feel sick, you're starting to get sick, and now you can have at least someone you can talk to immediately, or schedule someone in the short term to be able to deliver some type of answers to you. So I think that's going to be important as that continues to increase over the next year. But the acceleration of health tech over the COVID period, I think is going to be a positive outcome of the pandemic.
Thank you. I'm glad that you're mentioning telehealth. Hampton University is on it. They made us get our telehealth certification. So the pharmacy students in our class are all telehealth certified for the next 2 years. So we were able to deliver those services to those patients who may need some quick questions about some common drugs that they're using on a daily basis. So I thought that was a great idea by Hampton, and thank you to our dean for creating that idea for us to get certified in telehealth. And last but not least, Mr. Taylor.
I have to agree with my colleagues on the panels that the biggest change is how we engage with our customers, as well as how we raise awareness to the patients those living with sickle cell disease. Because COVID, and when we were shut down, we had just launched in January of 2020 our product. So imagine trying to launch a drug and not being able to see your ACP, or not being able to raise awareness with the people living with sickle cell disease. So we really had to figure out new ways to engage with customers virtually, and we had to enhance our virtual toolkit. So we had to enhance all of the ways that we could connect with providers virtually, but at the same time, we had to also enhance our ways that we raise awareness around the drug to the population and to the sickle cell population. But in the same token, it's also delivery of drug. How do we get them? Because we work with specialty pharmacies. It's not, you can't just go to your local CVS or Walgreens to pick up your prescription. So we work with the specialty pharmacy because we do have a very expensive agent. And so I think we had to figure out how do we then connect with that person living with sickle cell disease to be able to deliver drug. So I think the advent of telehealth, but also virtual tools and virtual engagements with our customers has been the biggest difference. And I believe, like Brian said, these changes have been great because now we have much more flexibility to engage with customers, where we can see them in person, we can see them virtually, and have many more tools that we can engage with them to continue to drive awareness, raise awareness, both with the ACP as well as the patient community.
Thank you. Thank you. All great insights from our four panelists. Next, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to go back in time, back into our Hampton days when we were on campus by our home by the sea. So we're just going to talk about some experiences, some potentially maybe some clubs, some organizations that you were a part of that helped you prepare for your career that you're in right now. We're going to start with Rear Admiral Mix.
Sure. And I don't think there is a major at Hampton quite like the nursing major, right? We arrive freshman year and we disappear, and then we come back at graduation. And most people, when we show up at graduation, don't even realize we were still in school, right? The reason for that is from sophomore year, we are entrenched in the curriculum. And we just really get enveloped within, the Hampton University School of Nursing. But at the same time, that HBCU experience of, you are here to learn, you are here to excel, and I'm here to empower you to do that and to have that be done is also instilled with us inside of us early. So I joined Chi Phi Nursing Sorority my sophomore year. And through my engagement and leadership opportunities with the chapter, we were participating in community health-related activities. We were working with the graduate chapter who were professional nurses. Many of them served as mentors. The faculty were like second parents. And so they introduced us professionally, academically to the world of nursing. And I think lastly, the other piece is, when we started our clinical rotations, we were working 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. You know what I mean? We were grabbing food and running across campus because we had to make that bus to get all the way to Virginia Beach. And so we're watching all of our friends doing all this great stuff. And we're like, but we got to get up tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock, or we got class from 8 to 12 and then another class from 1 to 5. So I think it forced us into this kind of mentality that the work needs to be done, but it also instilled in us the relevance, the significance, and the importance of the work that we were doing. So by the time we were about to graduate, we already knew, we had a place in the world, we had a job waiting for us, and there was a lot of good to be done. So I credit that Hampton experience. It took being Black off the table, right? That's not a handicap. It's not a trophy. It's not a handicap. That's off the table. So what else do you have, and what else can I develop in you? And I think those are some of the most important nuggets that I got out of my Hampton experience.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah. So, Hampton really does make you feel like you are in a world apart from other HBCUs, other colleges and universities, overall, for that matter. I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't get a sense of pride and excellence from my parents, because they certainly did instill that in my sister and I. But Hampton certainly helped to reinforce that sense of pride and the striving for excellence in everything that you do, right? The idea that if you're going to do something, why not be the best at it, right? I certainly got that from Hampton from absolutely day one. The sense of professionalism that the school instills in its students. We were joking just before we went live talking about, to be on time is to be early, things that you learned during your freshman orientation. These are things that you take throughout your entire career. The sense of responsibility, the sense of purpose, the sense of giving back to your community. These are also certainly things that I learned in my time in Hampton. I was fortunate enough to participate in the student leadership program. I'm also a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, the Beta Chi chapter. Shout out to all the noops out there. We spent a lot of time giving back to the community, spending time tutoring young children after school, doing cleanup work, you name it, you name the project, we were on top of it. So the other piece to it is the sense of teamwork and collaboration. I don't know of a school at Hampton University that did not have this sense of working together, ensuring that your fellow student is achieving to the best of their ability, right? I can speak specifically to the business school that, there were many a time where my classmates and I are cramming for examinations, preparing for presentations. Failing was not cool, and it was not okay for you to allow your fellow classmate to do so, right? Everyone was to lift each other up to ensure that we could be successful, right? And these are things that certainly tenets that I have taken in a variety of roles that I've had throughout the years. And I certainly believe that these are things that have helped me to be successful thus far. And I plan on, ensuring that those that I mentor get the same type of knowledge that I got starting from Hampton, and hopefully they can apply that to their careers as well.
Yeah, great. Next, John.
Yeah, and just piggybacking on a couple of things that Rear Admiral Meeks and Brian said. At Hampton, I was a biology major, so I was part of the pre-med club. Like Brian, I was a student leader. I was a class officer for several years. In graduate school, I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha. But one of the important things was that you were in an environment that allowed you to grow and excel without the pressures of the outside world. Obviously being at HBCU, you don't have to worry about your skin color, but the things that we now that barrier has been lifted, and you're able to engage with people that that you've never been around or been before. Like I grew up in Miami, I grew up in the South. My family is from Mississippi. It was the first time I was around a large group of people from the North or from the Midwest. And so engaging with those and learning how those behaviors work and how to take your personality and intermix with people who have different life experiences and different ways of growing up, those things you're able to take with you as you go to different jobs and different places around the world. And so you develop a sense of confidence and a comfort level that you may not be able to get at other schools. And I know there are a lot of HBCUs out there. We're all partial to Hampton. I think Hampton also develops a special culture, like Brian said, where everyone is collaborative. Everyone's the same. We joke about the different classes, but if you're a Hamptonian, we are all family. I think that's something that we definitely hold dear to ourselves, even to this day. Like Brian and I were at school at the same time. I probably haven't seen Brian in 10 years, but we can go back and reminisce on all the things while we were on campus together. And so those things you hold dear, and as you're progressing through your career, those are the abilities to be able to intermix in diverse environments and non-diverse environments, to be able to know, like, I have the sense of confidence that Hampton instilled or reinforced to be able to move forward. So I think those are some of the best lessons and thoughts I can think of my time at Hampton.
And Mr. Taylor.
I have to echo the words of my frat brother, Brian Hawkins here. I too am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, but I also did the graduate chapter. While on campus, like I said earlier, I was a class of 93. I played basketball. So we were actually on the CIAA winning team in 1991. And I had to learn the power of collaboration and teamwork, but also the ability to compete each and every day. We had to compete in practice. We had to compete in games. And I had to take that lesson with me and always be prepared. I think that the biggest thing about that is learning to always be ready, always be prepared, but also having the confidence in yourself. And I know that when I got to graduate school at UMass, I remember getting the list of where everyone was from. I saw Harvard, I saw Amherst, I saw Notre Dame. And then once I got to class, I realized they're no different than I, and I know I had the foundation to compete. And I was equally as prepared, if not more prepared, than what they were. And so I think I learned that from my time at Hampton. I learned that ability to time manage of playing a sport and managing my academic load and my academic requirements. That was very important to me, to make sure that I maintained my GPA, but also still enjoyed the college life. So I had my teammates, but then I also had all of my friends that did not play sports, and I had that bond with them. And then as I've grown in my career, no matter what HBCU that some of our peers have gone to, there's a common bond. And then when I meet a Hamptonian, we have that common bond. We always go back to our home by the sea. Like we were talking about earlier, what class we were in. I was Onyx 2. We've heard Quintessence. We've heard other classes. And I think that we had that sense of pride about the foundation that was given to us. And I think that Hampton gave me an amazing foundation where, as an African-American man, I have such confidence walking into any room, knowing that I'm equal to anyone in the room, and that I can compete, and I'm always prepared for whatever's brought my way. And I think there's a sense of calm that I've learned from Hampton, that when the storm gets the highest, to make sure that I remain calm so that I can perform at all levels at all times.
Great, all great experiences. The power of collaboration was a theme that I've heard throughout all the panelists and what they're saying, and being able to diversify yourself and not just just coming from an HBCU, that you are more than just an HBCU. You are a competitive candidate in whatever that you're going towards. So just thinking about, again, that experience that you had in undergrad, and thinking about all the things that you know now, if you could go back in time, back to those undergrad days and give yourself some advice or tell yourself something, what would that piece of advice, or what would you tell yourself? And we can start with Admiral Mix.
I think one thing that I would say is to take every opportunity when it's presented. Coming to Hampton, I came as, the co-captain of the cheer squad, excelling academically, and, really feeling like I was doing something. Then I got to Hampton and recognized that, and so was everyone else, right? Everyone there was excellent. And so I think it caused me to kind of go into a little bit of a shell, right? Because I'm used to being on top, and now I'm kind of one of everybody. So it took a little while for me to actually find my legs in order to reach out and to engage with more things, on campus and things of that nature. So I would definitely say take those opportunities while they're given to you, because it is a protective environment. And just like was said before, everything at Hampton is set up for you to succeed, right? Take advantage of that. Tap into your network, create those networks, and from day one, don't be afraid of it.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yeah, I think we focus so much on performing and excelling at your responsibilities, whether it's your job or academically or what have you. What I would tell myself is, obviously that's a needed and required part of the equation. But performing in your job is only going to get you so far. And I'll piggyback on a comment that Admiral Mix just made, and that is build your network, right? I'll share an example. There are times where there are people that I know that spend a significant amount of their time networking and not actually executing the roles and responsibilities for their job, yet they climb that corporate ladder just as swiftly as anyone else, right? So the significance and the importance of building your network is so critical. So if I were to go back and tell myself, that would be one of the things that I would communicate. Something else that I'd probably share is just get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Growth does not come from a place of comfort. Growth comes from a place where you're stretching yourself, you're pushing yourself, you're challenging yourself to be greater than you were the day before. So just stay in that particular level of uncomfort consistently, and see how swiftly you'll be able to achieve your dreams. The last thing that I would probably tell myself is just take more risks. I grew up with a father that is fairly conservative, and so his idea was get good grades, get a job, do well in your job. That's it, right? But I would tell myself to take more risks, whether that be professionally or what have you. Just do things that you maybe didn't think of along the way that could present you with opportunities that maybe you never considered that you would be able to participate in. So those are the 3 things I'd say.
John?
Going back, I definitely think about networking more, being more receptive to people outside of your necessarily your clique or the group of friends that you kind of hold dear every single day. Because Hampton has a lot of amazing people. A lot of people just being there on campus, but a lot of times they're acquaintances, and you don't develop those deep relationships. And thinking back on some of the experience I had, you're always like, what happened to this person? What happened to that person? So developing a deeper relationship, or the continuity of being able to sustain relationships over time, I think that's something I would definitely want to tell my younger self to be able to do. And then also, take a step back and enjoy some of the experiences that came about. We're like you said, you're pushing and you're always trying to excel, but you don't ever take time to kind of sit back and enjoy some of the things that you had the opportunity to accomplish, because you're always trying to push and strive to some of the newer and newer things that you're looking to be able to do. So sometimes it takes good to pause and just to kind of appreciate all the beauty that Hampton had to offer. And I think that that'll just give me more affirmation for the school and things that we've done.
Mr. Taylor?
What would I tell my younger self? I think number one would be, don't be afraid of the unknown. Don't be afraid of what you don't know. Don't be afraid to take risk or take chances. I think there's probably a lot of times that fear crept in and held me back from taking opportunities that I probably may have found a blessing. And so I definitely would say, don't be afraid. I think that you've heard the other panelists all talk about building a network, but I definitely would encourage that. But I'd also say explore. Go out there, explore different challenges, explore the world, go learn things that you haven't learned before. And I think that's very important. I think the other key is, as you grow in your career, don't be afraid to take time to take a step back and breathe and think and take time for yourself. I think that a lot of times we get caught up and continue to say, I want to grow the career ladder, I want to do these things. But what is missed is taking time for me. I think that when I allow myself to breathe and think and take time for myself, I'm able to blossom even more and grow even more, because I'm able to now retrospectively look back and see what lessons did I learn, where can I improve, and how can I grow. So I have to take that time to myself too, because I think I found that when I get mentally tired is when I'm not as productive as I need to be. So I really need that time to myself.
Thank you all for the great insight. We have a special question coming in from YouTube from Donald Grant, and the question is, how do you manage/balance your personal dedication to bridging the Black health gaps and inequities with your executive roles and responsibilities? And with this question, we're going to start with Mr. Taylor, just to get switch it up a little bit.
I think that because that's a great question. And many times as an African-American executive, I've been the only one in the room. I worked for almost 11 years at a diabetes company, Novo Nordisk. And I think that the balance for me was that I was the one actually pushing, what can we do to discuss the role of African Americans and health disparities? What can we do to really focus on multicultural marketing and get pieces to reach the African American community? And so I had to make sure that I continued to be the champion for that. I think that I felt the responsibility that I had to be that champion. I had to be the one to speak up. I had to be the one to say, make sure that there are a lot of microaggressions and perceptions, and dispel those. But I also wanted to be the one for someone behind me that wanted to grow within their career, that I wanted to be able to give back and be an advocate as well as a mentor to someone necessarily behind me, to pave the way where I can break down doors and knock down walls, so that someone behind me can have those same opportunities to flourish, so that I'm not the only one in the room, but there's someone else in the room. So I think that the key point is to remain a champion, remain true to yourself, and know that there's others behind you that are coming in that are going to build that bridge to success and get more African Americans in the healthcare space into the executive suite.
And next, we're going to go with John.
Yeah, I'll take it in twofold steps. One being leadership. You can't be afraid to be, if you're in the position to hire and build your team, you can't be afraid to build a diverse team. I know that's something in my last two companies that I've been able to do. Since I've been responsible for a lot of the hiring, I've been able to bring in a diverse team, and I've had some amazing HBCU employees that have risen into the managerial and even executive level, and some non, and so that, and it doesn't necessarily need to be people of color. It can be women, it can be those with disabilities. But if you're in a hiring position and you want to change diversity within your organization, you actually have the opportunity and the power to do that. So I'll say, don't be fearful of doing that, and doing that. And then in regards to delivery of care, one thing that I've been passionate about for my entire career is increasing the amount of minority and underserved populations in clinical trials. And because data has shown that when you're doing these studies, being able to have a more diverse patient population, you can see what the actual outcomes will be. And I know much of your pharmacy majors, I'm sure you guys looked at different types of medications, how different ethnicities, different physiologies change, the medication works differently. And the only way to really do that is to have, during the clinical trial portion, to have the testing. Now I know that clinical trials in the Black community has a big sort of black eye. A lot of the historical, a lot of things that we've done. So a lot of the work that I've done with the NMA, National Medical Association, and other organizations and advocacy groups are trying to change that perspective. I know there was a big outpouring of concern and dislike when, you know, the president of FIS was like, I'm interested in the COVID vaccine trials, and going through a lot of the questions that went along those lines. But we as executives, we in leadership are responsible for you know, taking up that mantle and leading the flag, saying like there are equitable clinical trials. The integrity is there, and we're trying to get good data to provide better outcomes for all people. And we have to be able to bridge the gap, find more Black investigators, those are physicians participating in the trial, to be able to get access to patients to get better health outcomes downstream.
And Mr. Hawkins?
Yeah, so first and foremost, thank you, Dr. Grant, for the question. You are a gentleman and a scholar. I think it's important that every role that I've ever had, I've taken a personal responsibility to ensure that I'm at least doing my part to ensure that communities of color are represented, whether that's, you know, from a very early on when I was a sales representative, ensuring that physicians of color are getting the same types of resources and information as the physicians that were predominantly white, whether that's working with the leaders of the healthcare community that were of color, that were working to ensure that they're getting resources for communities that were not being, or that were being underrepresented, or whether that's now ensuring that I'm providing a voice to the work that we're doing that supports our diabetes efforts. Having the opportunity to share your perspective, your point of view, and ensuring that whatever goes out the door makes sense for your community. It's not only something that we should be making an effort to do, it's quite frankly a responsibility, right? I'll call your attention to the t-shirts. I think it was H&M a couple years ago, where they had the advertisement with the young African-American child with the t-shirt with the monkey. And I remember having a conversation saying, if there was only someone in the room that would say, that's a bad idea, right? When you're sitting in the room, it's our responsibility to say, hey, that's a bad idea, right? So, you know, given the opportunity, I certainly am making sure that I'm not squandering the challenge. And quite frankly, I've been in a fortunate position where I've never received any pushback when I've provided that point of view to say, hey, this is not something that would likely work for our community, and here's why, right? As long as you give the rationale, typically it's usually well received. And again, I recognize that I'm in a very fortunate position. It does not always work like that in corporate America. But again, we can't be afraid to lift our voice and provide that perspective.
And Admiral Mix.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what's been said. And what I will also add is, you know, my executive responsibility and role actually is to stand in that place and to hold space for everything related to those healthcare disparities. So as a public health professional, as a nurse, these are the conversations that must happen. So for me, not only am I serving as chief nurse, but I serve as a senior advisor for the Minority Officer Liaison Council within Public Health Service. One of the groups that make up that council is the Black Commission Officers Advisory Group. And so as part of that group and in working with the officers in that group, collectively, we are raising the voices for the experiences of Black folks across the country. Are we every experience? Absolutely not. But what we can do is make sure that these experiences, that people are asking the questions and taking these things into consideration. I think the other part as an executive, the role and responsibility that we hold is, you know, never underestimate the power of someone seeing themselves sitting in that chair, right? So I am the second of 12 chief nurses in the public health service who are Black women. The first one is also a Hampton grad, right? And we wear that proudly, but understand that seeing her in that role and recognizing that, wow, that is something that's attainable. That's something that is actually for us. You know what I mean? Sometimes you give people permission to follow you into these executive and leadership roles just by virtue of being there. So sometimes it's what you do, sometimes it's who you are. And again, sometimes it's just the fact that you pulled up a chair and you told somebody else, hey, you got a seat here. One of the things that I tell people also is, sometimes there's a seat at the table, take it. Sometimes there's not a seat at the table. Bring your own chair. And sometimes there's no space for your chair. Guess what? Build your own table, create your own invitations, right? Because just because you don't have a voice in that particular circle doesn't mean that the work that you're trying to accomplish is not important. So never shy away from the issue of healthcare disparities. Be that voice, just like as was said, at every opportunity that you have. Leadership occurs at all levels. You don't have to wait until you're an executive in order to be that voice. But for those of us that have reached these levels, we learned at Hampton, right? You always reach down and you bring other people up behind you, because guess what? We're not going to be in these positions forever. So we want to look towards all of you, our Hampton colleagues and others, to come behind us and to feel comfortable in this space too.
Thank you all for the great insight. I just want to pivot a little bit, kind of talk about the pandemic, especially with the misinterpretations, the misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccine. As African Americans, John kind of touched upon it a lot. There's a lot of healthcare mistrust that goes on, and we all probably know about the stories of the Henrietta Lacks, the Tuskegee experiment. Just kind of talking about your company's involvement or just your perspective on the COVID-19 vaccine. What is your viewpoints on the COVID-19 vaccine, and has your company or yourself been part of any efforts to help increase the participation in getting vaccinated? And we can start with Mr. Taylor.
Well, my company is not involved in the vaccine process at all. But I personally, I'm encouraging as many people as I can to get vaccinated. I've had both. I've been fully vaccinated, and I think that for myself, that the science is good. I think that the science is good. I think that the efficacy is great, and you see that. And I think that it's important, not just for myself to be vaccinated, but for others. My charge for getting vaccinated so quickly was that during this past year, during COVID-19, I was unable to see my family. And I had to worry about my mother, and I had to worry about my stepfather as well. And I wanted to make sure that I can get back to my family and make sure that they were safe. And then looking at it, I have personally gone out through the fraternity as well to spread the word around how important it is to raise awareness around getting vaccinated and what we need to do for our community when you see Black and brown people getting impacted by COVID, and how this vaccine will help our community. I realize the challenges. I think we've talked about that in regards to clinical trials, but I also think that it's important that we share that these are safe vaccines and these are good. The science is good on the vaccines, and that I would encourage as many people as possible to go ahead and get vaccinated.
And John?
So Mitchell, this goes back to your earlier comments when Dr. Google is not your friend. So I think a lot of the misinformation is just it's twofold. One, there is mistrust in terms of pharmaceutical companies, pharmaceutical industry, a lot in the people of color, but across the board, because there's been issues in lawsuits and things like that over data and how they performed over the years. And then there's inherent mistrust in the country also when it comes to the government and how the government's going around instituting different things and having different policies, depending on the political spectrum where you fall, and that's leading to a lot of misinformation being out there and exists. I've been fully vaccinated. I'm a proponent of the vaccines. And then in just looking at the clinical trials and the data, yes, a lot of the trials were accelerated, but there's been a lot of research, a lot of work done in terms of how to ramp up the delivery and speed of bringing vaccines to market. That has not necessarily been talked about over the course of delivery of the vaccine. So this is a novel new technology that's being first deployed, but there's been a lot of research in the past in terms of to bring it current and bring it to date. So I think those are getting vaccinated, and those in the healthcare community, those in the executive level that have the ability should be, as Brian said, we should be out there advocating and informing and trying to get as many people vaccinated as possible. Our company hasn't been involved in terms of vaccines. We've been very, very early on. We purchased a lot of PPE and shipped it around the country to be able to help healthcare providers, especially our sites and our physicians that are participating in our clinical trials, to be able to have the necessary PPE to keep themselves safe and their patients safe until the vaccine was available. But in the direct research, no. But I think a lot of the misinformations come from just a lot of distrust around not only clinical trials in general, but also just the government and the climate that we're in the country.
Hey, Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, so I will say this, and I'll be brief because Admiral Mix is much more qualified to discuss this topic than I. But on March 2nd, Merck did announce that we are going to be working with Johnson & Johnson to help manufacture their vaccine, and I believe that kicks off sometime later in 2021. So I'll just state that. I have had my first dose of the vaccine. I get my second dose next week. I'm a huge proponent of getting vaccinated. I've ensured that my family members are getting vaccinated. I completely understand where the concern comes from. I completely recognize where the history of mistrust that our people have had with vaccines, et cetera. I would just humbly request that if you have a concern or a question, speak to your healthcare provider, right? As John mentioned, this is not a scenario where Googling the information is going to get you where you want to go, right? There's a lot of misinformation out there, and the best way to get actual information specific to you, right? Because we're talking about a vaccine that's going to be injected into your body. Speak to your healthcare provider about whether it's right or not for you, right? So I would just humbly request that you do that.
And Admiral Mix.
I want to share both from a personal and a professional perspective. So from a personal perspective, everything that's been said, right? So I, of course, had family, had friends who had significant questions. So I was fielding a lot of those questions at the very beginning at a point where I'm still trying to get answers, right? Because if you think back to the very beginning of the whole COVID pandemic, there was so much that we did not know. And so people were confused. So by the time the vaccine was actually available, it took a while for me to even feel comfortable, right? And I share that with people because I think people assume that, those of us that are, well educated in the field, it's at first option, we just jumped into it to do it. Absolutely not. I was notified that I would be able to take the vaccine. I was notified in December. I got my first dose at the end of February. And for all the reasons that were shared, right? I had questions, right? I had to make sure that I had the answers, that, the things that I was concerned about, I had to take the time to find the answers from people that I trusted. So healthcare professionals, and more importantly, even the public health professionals, right? Because not every healthcare professional, nurses included, are trained in a way that they are aware of public health implications and pandemics and how viruses are spread and how vaccines are made and all these different things that came into play. So yes, professionally and personally to the vaccines. I have been fully vaccinated at this point, as has about 99% of my family, many of my friends. Many of them waited until I did. I'm okay with that, right? But it just shows you the significance. What I would say as far as those that might be still on the fence, unsure, things of that nature, I echo that it is extremely important to figure out what is your concern. get the questions answered. Don't rely on Dr. Google or, somebody down the street who happened to hear from somebody across the street and use that as your medical advice. Those of us that have been vaccinated, it does you no good to try to shame people into getting the vaccine, right? People will do it in their own time and for their right reasons. And some people just can't get it at all. It is very real. The Tuskegee experiment, I have conversations with people all the time because when they do Google, they see, the United States Public Health Service played a part. And I have to remind people, let's look at the composition of the Commission Corps then and what it is now. We have officers that are within all of these agencies that have been involved with this pandemic at all levels. And there are Black and brown officers. And so there are people in places now that were not there before. And to the last question, the same concept. There are people that are asking questions that were not asked previously. And so there are guardrails and boundaries and rules and regulations that are in place right now to protect people. So the final point is get vaccinated, right? If not only for you, but for those of us who cannot get vaccinated so that they can live a healthy life as well.
All great points. I have to plug in my profession right here. As a pharmacy student, we are one of the most accessible healthcare professionals in the world. You literally can go right down the street to your local CVS, your Rite Aid, Walmart, wherever it may be, and get a free consultation. If you have any questions, we are more than happy to answer any of the questions that you may have in regards to the COVID-19 vaccines. Imagine my family, my coworkers, friends, who are they asking about this? Me. And I have to make sure that I'm abreast with the current news that's going on, the clinical trials, the primary, secondary endpoints, with everything. And I have to make sure that, hey, I have their best interests at heart, and I understand when I make a recommendation that I know that it's not going to be detrimental to them. So, my phone blows up all the time with COVID-19 vaccine questions. Hampton University made sure that we made it a point to make sure that we as students were taught the information and being able to break down the barriers of any mistrust or misinformation that has been propagated over social media and through the web as well. So please utilize us pharmacists. We are there for you. It's free consultation. We are at the fingertips of your assistance whenever needed. So we're going to just segue into our last question. And this has been an inspirational talk. Learned so much from each and every one of you in your different professions. Just for that person who has attended and they're thinking to themselves, hey, healthcare might be something that I think I want to start to pivot into. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who's trying to potentially, pivot careers or switch careers within the healthcare field, wherever it may be? And we can start with Mr. Taylor.
What advice would I give to someone that wants to pivot into healthcare? I would say understand what you're getting into. There's a great responsibility in that. I think that you need to understand, especially for pharmaceutical sales, that you have to be patient focused. You have to be thinking about the people, the end users of the product that you have. You got to make sure that you want to serve that community and make sure you're serving those patients so that they can have an improved life. I think that if you want to get into it, I think it's important that you understand that you are really changing lives with the medication that you're representing and the medication that you are promoting to healthcare professionals out there. So I think that you have to take that that responsibility upon yourself. And the thing I will tell people also is that, especially in pharmaceutical sales, that you have to have great discipline. This is a field that I don't see my boss every day. I may not even talk to my boss every day. So you have to have the discipline to get up every day and go out and hit the pavement and execute upon the job and responsibility that you have, realizing that you are impacting at the end user, which could have impact on people's lives.
And John?
The most rewarding thing about being in the healthcare field is the end user, is the knowing that the work is ultimately going to impact somebody's life. And if you're that person that wants to give back, wants to be selfless in terms of the work that you do, like the healthcare field is amazing for that. I think one thing, and going back to your previous question, one thing even for myself is that the diversity of work you can do within the healthcare field is vast. It's a huge industry. It's $1 trillion industry. So you don't necessarily have to be tied to clinical or medical or have a scientific background. Like, you can find a space for yourself with the knowledge that you really want to impact people's lives. I think that's, one thing that's different from most industries is that no matter what you do and where you find yourself, in what segment of the industry you find yourself in, you're only going to be able to impact the end user, which are people, which is a great rewarding feeling for a career to have.
And Mr. Hawkins.
Yeah, Mitchell. So I began our engagement today stating that healthcare wasn't necessarily what I had initially intended to get into, but the potential impact that we can have on patients' lives is exactly why I stayed. The work that we do is important, it is significant, and the opportunities are vast. As John mentioned, there are a vast array of different roles that you can take within the healthcare landscape, whether it be from pharmaceuticals to direct care, right? And so I would just say do the research and see what area fits you most, but also do the research to better understand where healthcare is going in the future, because you want to put yourself in a position that you can not only be successful and provide for yourself and your family today, but also prepare yourself to provide for yourself and your family long-term in the future as well. And so it's important to have a better sense for where the trends in healthcare are going and see and identify if there are areas that you might want to explore that you maybe didn't consider, or maybe that aren't as popular today. So I would just encourage anyone that's interested to do the research. Don't give up. I know a lot of people that have tried for a really long time to get into the pharma industry specifically. And after a number of years, we're finally able to break through. You are capable, so never give up and give it your all. And I'm sure you'll finally accomplish your goals.
And Admiral mix.
Yeah, nursing as a profession, it's truly the art and the science of caring, right? People are always at the center of what we do. So for anyone who might be considering a career in nursing, that's first and foremost. We are the patient advocates. And so we end up being that liaison oftentimes between the person and the other healthcare providers. So we're coordinating care, we're translating, we're educating. Again, the core of what we do is the patient, or the person or the client or the community, and how they are responding to whatever the health challenges that exist. Nursing is not easy, not by a long shot. It's a very rewarding career, but it is not easy. And what I would always say is to find someone who is doing the day-to-day of what you're interested in, and whether that be nursing or another healthcare profession, because you want to make sure that you understand what they have to do on a day-to-day basis, in addition to what the ultimate goal is for that particular career path. And only then can you really decide if that's what you want to do with your life.
Mike, thank you so much to all of our panelists for this invigorating conversation, so much information that I was able to retain here myself. Still being a student and being able to grab and hold on to these gems that you all dropped, and I'm saving them for later, obviously, as I go on to my last year in pharmacy school. Thank you so much to the NHAA for providing this space for us to have this conversation about healthcare. Shout out to the C-suite, and I'll pass it along to Gina.
Thank you so much, Mitchell, and thank you to the panelists, to Admiral Mix, to John, and Brian. And Brian, thank you all for your time today and for dropping so many gems. I've known some of you for a number of years and had no idea you were this smart. So that's awesome to have you all on this panel. And thank you to our moderator for being so professional and keeping everything flowing and keeping us on deck. It was a great conversation. I'd also like to thank, the C-suite was started and founded by Van Crawford, who is still behind the scenes getting us started and keeping these going. And so I want to thank him for all that he's done as it relates to the C-suite, and also to Brandy Saunders, who helped us put together this panel, this particular one around healthcare. So I want to thank the both of them that are doing the work behind the scenes that people don't normally see. So thank you to both of you. For those of you that are dying to give us suggestions on the next C-suite, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at getsocial@nhaainc.org if you have any ideas for our next C-suites. We will be taking a break over the course of the summer because, outside is kind of open for some places, and we want to take a little bit of time to enjoy that. And we'll be returning with our next C-suite in September. So thank you all for joining us. Don't forget to like and follow our NHAA Inc. handle. That's also our handle on Instagram as well. And be sure to share this link. We do record them, and they will be out there for your perusal after the fact. But again, thank you to everyone that's joined us today. And thank you so much again to our panelists and our moderators. You all have a great evening.